California for 5 minutes.
I have worked with Administrator Guzman on numerous occasions at various events, and I've known her to be nothing but conscientious when invited to meetings. And I certainly know that had she been apprised of some alternate date, she would have been here, as she has been at your numerous meetings during this entire time. And in fact, I would like to submit for the record the letter to Chairman Roger Williams, which says that Administrator Guzman was unable to testify due to previously scheduled commitments that required her to be outside Washington, D.C. on this date. So I would have hoped that there would have been some consideration for her schedule. So let me say, Mr. Ware, I do find it unsettling that your white paper estimates $200 billion in potential fraud, and the SBA report is so different with the $36 billion in likely fraud. Now, I know that in the SBA's letter, they state that nearly 86% of all pandemic funding originated under the previous administration without important controls in place. That is why the Biden and Harris administration took action to rebuild and strengthen anti-fraud controls, such as checking the Treasury Do Not Pay database and verifying tax income. SBA learned from the mistakes of the 2020 implementation of PPP and COVID EIDL to design the two major relief programs that launched in 2021, the Shuttered Venues Operator Grant Program and the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which both achieved estimated fraud rates of well below 1%. Mr. Ware, do you acknowledge that that is true?
I cannot validate. We are conducting work right now on restaurant revitalization and shuttered venues. So our work will dictate what that is. But I could tell you that they did implement many of our recommendations, like do not pay, like the taxes. These are recommendations that we made in writing to everyone, and they have been a very willing partner in doing this.
Okay. I would also say SBA's first sweep actually found over $400 billion worth of further investigation, they would say. But then they continued beyond that initial automated screening with additional layers of review, from data analytic treatment to human-led manual review in order to weed out false positives. And that's where they got their $36 billion figure. And they argue that your white paper's estimate of $200 billion is so high because that figure is based on only an initial automated screening and therefore includes false positives. What do you say to that?
I think that's absolutely false. I think it's important to be on record as stating that the only investigations that SBA can conduct are those conducted by the investigative arm of SBA. We are the law enforcement authority. Fraud is this is our business. Fighting fraud is what we do. We are fully equipped to opine on what the potential fraud in the program is. SBA does not have access to the data sets that we have access to, number one. Number two, they don't sit in the middle of the fraud fight across the nation in U.S. attorneys' offices in every single state, in the Department of Justice, working with the task forces, working with all the different law enforcement entities.
Well, you do say that you periodically refine your overall fraud numbers to eliminate false positives, correct?
Which we did in this report.
But can your office reconcile the differences with the SBA in order to provide the committee with a more consistent estimate of the likely fraud?
I believe, like, honestly, with the reconciliation of those numbers, they're never going to be possible. They cannot have access to many of the data sets that we have access to for law enforcement purposes. I could provide to SBA every loan number that I can provide to them under the IG Act and under U.S. Attorney's rules and everything else. That's what I can do. However, more importantly, which is why it was surprising that it would be such an attack on a number, I think we get a little sidetracked with the number when we should be talking about the control environment that's necessary in any future program going forward and our ability to claw back as much funds as we possibly can. I would be as upset and passionate if I found that the number was 30-something billion. But I'm sitting in the middle of the fight, and 30-something billion dollars is just not a logical number.
I yield back.
I now recognize Representative Salazar from the great state of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Maria Salazar. I represent the city of Miami.